What's going on, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the 415ers podcast. As always, on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network, please download, rate, subscribe on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast from. Got a lot of good content coming up for you today concerning 49ers OTAs. We heard from Shanahan. We heard from Brock Purdy. We heard from Trey Lance. We heard from Sam Darnold. We heard from just about everyone we've been looking to hear from for a long time in the same room. But before we dig into it, Marc, Grandi, Evan Giddings, as always. Marc, my man, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's exciting times. We got to see Sam Darnold at a podium for a first time as a member of the 49ers.
The
We got
Ginger.
the Ginger. We got to hear from Brock Purdy, who he's not out there, practicing. He's not working at OTAs in any physical way. But you got to hear from him, which kind of surprised me. Generally, the 49ers don't make injured players available to the media. So that was a pleasant surprise, at least for me personally. We got to hear a lot from Trey Lance, and he was saying the right things as always. We'll get to that. And then, of course, Kyle Shanahan, who we knew was going to talk. He said some very Kyle Shanahan things. So we'll break it all down. But yeah, exciting times. I'm doing well. How are you, Evan?
I'm good. I'm good. The only thing that disgruntles me a little bit about this week is with our day job at 95.7, neither of us are able to actually get down to OTAs.
Yeah.
I would love the opportunity to go watch practice. Of course, Trey Lance featured his new throwing motion a little bit from all the videos that have been circulating, and appreciate all those who are posting videos and allowing us to kind of get a glimpse, along with, of course, all the fans down there that are posting on their socials. So it's an exciting time. I mean, there's a lot of this might be, I don't know, like the most certainly uncertain kind of group I think I've had a chance to cover in football, just because of the question marks at the quarterback position. But Kyle Shanahan doesn't feel that way, Marc, because during his press conference, he described this QB room, including Brandon Allen, of course, in addition to the three guys that we just talked about, the most, kind of talented. I mean, he didn't want to compare it to past years, but essentially saying that with two guys taken in the top five, Lance and Darnold, along with a guy who played like he was taken in the top five last year, being Brock Purdy, he feels fortunate with his four. So I'll leave it to you first. What did you kind of take away from his comments? And do you feel like this is maybe the most talent Shanahan has ever had in his QB room?
Oh yeah, so he said, quote, "We have two guys who are talented enough to be taken in the top 5 of the draft, and we have another guy who played like it last year." All of that together, as you posed the question, is this the most talented quarterback room Kyle Shanahan has ever had? Um, I guess it depends how you define talent. I think it's interesting the way Kyle Shanahan phrased it. Two guys that are talented enough to be taken in the top 5 of the draft, and another guy who has played like it last year. What that means is only one of those three guys has ever played like a top 5 NFL draft pick. And I don't know, I guess could argue did Brock Purdy even do that last year? I know there would be people out there that would say no, he didn't look like a top 5 draft pick. He just looked like a decent quarterback playing with a really good offense. I'm not here to talk about that. But I took Kyle Shanahan's comments as, of course, he's going to be complimentary of all of his guys. But there's a pretty big gap between Brock Purdy and the others. It seems to me, at least that's how I interpreted what Kyle Shanahan said. Uh, you know, Trey Lance is a physical specimen, and he's got height on Brock Purdy. He's got strength on Brock Purdy. He can throw the ball farther. He can probably throw it much faster. But maybe he lacks other areas from Brock Purdy, and that's why Purdy has had more success at this level so far. And you could say the exact same thing for Sam Darnold. He's had of course, a much different experience in terms of actually starting games, but he is a high draft pick who hasn't had a lot of success yet, who expectations has changed a lot throughout his NFL career, and it's still a relatively young NFL career. To me, Darnold and Lance are being lumped into the same group. Fair or not, I think that's how it's working. And Brock Purdy is quite a distance ahead of those two guys. That was my main takeaway from what Kyle Shanahan said. There are two groups in this quarterback room. The first group is a one-person group in Brock Purdy, and then everyone else in the next group, and that includes Darnold and Lance.
Yeah, and look, the 49ers, as they mentioned, are optimistic about Brock Purdy being there early in the season. We can get into whether we feel optimistic about that a little bit later on. But yeah, I don't doubt that he feels like this is the most talent that he's had in a quarterback room. But there's a couple of things from it that I took away. One, talent, especially in sports, largely in football, is kind of a code word. It's a code word for we don't know what we have, because you say someone is talented, you see the skills, but they've yet to develop a professional identity as an athlete on the field. So from there, I agree. Yes, this is the most talent that they've had, because we don't know even about Brock Purdy as much. He played, started 5 regular season games, got a few more in the postseason. He's looked the best of these 3 by far, even though Darnold has had the most experience. But when it comes to talent, to me, Kyle Shanahan is, yes, he's being complimentary, but it's because he doesn't have another choice. Like he literally has nothing physical or tangible for the majority of his quarterbacks to say, this is what they do well. And this is why I feel confident in saying that, I haven't had to compare this team to, previous QB rooms. Like, yeah, I'll say it's better than the 2017 team that he inherited his first year when he had CJ Beathard and, Brian Hoyer and had to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah, it's a better QB room than that. But the other issue that I have with this quarterback room, Mark, is the established hierarchy. Because right now, Brock Purdy, he would be QB1, but he is a question mark due to his injury, and we don't know how quickly he's going to be back. So let me just read you a couple of the best quarterback rooms that I could find from NFL history. The 49ers being one of them, late 80s into the early 90s, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Steve Bono. The 2004 San Diego Chargers with Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, and Doug Flutie, and the 1994 Green Bay Packers with Brett Favre, Mark Brunell, and a guy named Kurt Warner who was sitting on the side. Those are talented quarterback rooms, but there's an established hierarchy of who's at the top and what kind of player each of those quarterbacks are. Now, obviously, it's different because you got pedigree with the late 80s 49ers. You had promise with the early 2000s Chargers, and Brett Favre had already been semi-established in the middle 1990s for the Packers. But when I hear talent, I think that Kyle Shanahan is basically guessing on what he's got. And even if he feels confident in Brock Purdy, we still don't know how quickly he's going to be back. So at this point, I'm sure he feels like he has the most talent ever, but there's no established hierarchy. And for me, that poses a big problem going into a season that you expect to compete for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, maybe it's the word choice here from Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, he wants to sell it as best as he possibly can, but maybe the better word and the more accurate word is this is the most potential Shanahan has ever had at quarterback. And I think that is 100% true. Maybe back when he was an assistant in Washington, when he was, running the offense when they drafted RG3 and they also had Kirk Cousins. That was a decent quarterback room in terms of potential because those were both young guys who still had a lot of room to grow. Now, of course, we know what happened with RG3, and it was a short-lived career despite the fact that he was incredible as a rookie. But I think that's more fitting of this 49ers quarterback room, Evan. They have the potential to together be one of the more talented quarterbacks rooms that Kyle Shanahan has ever had, or just in recent memory in the NFL. I mean, if Brock Purdy continues to play like he did last year when he didn't lose a single start until he got hurt early in the NFC Championship game, if he continues to be that guy, if Trey Lance finally gets a chance, whether it's with the 49ers or somewhere else, and we eventually come to the conclusion like, hey, he was worthy of a top 5 pick. And then if Sam Darnold kind of resurrects his career, which is probably the least likely of the 3 things to happen, at least that would be my opinion. But still, if that were to happen, there's no one doubting that he has incredible arm strength. We've talked about that a lot over the last couple of weeks. If that were to happen, then yeah, this is an incredibly talented quarterback room that the 49ers happen to have. But the more accurate word is potential, and you just aren't sure if that potential is going to be realized or not on all 3 cases. I mean, Brock Purdy could come out this year. Maybe he misses a week or two. Maybe he's ready week 1, whatever it is. And he struggles. And maybe he never quite regains the form that he had towards the end of the regular season last year. That is 100% possible. And maybe the 49ers just entirely struck out on Trey Lance, which it seems to be the favorite as opposed to him becoming a great player. And it would not be an upset at all if Sam Darnold just continues to be a career journeyman in the NFL at this point. Talent, okay, fair enough, Kyle Shanahan, but you're dealing with hypotheticals here. The better word is potential. This quarterback room has the potential to be great. But guess what? On the flip side, it also has the potential to be a dumpster fire.
Yeah, the potential thing is absolutely two-sided. Let me ask you this. Do you think that the 49ers are in a better position right now at quarterback than they were at this point last year? Which would mean that Jimmy Garoppolo, we thought, would have been gone. So right now you're looking at a quarterback room with impending QB1 Trey Lance, who I think we had more confidence in at this time last year than we obviously do right now. And then I think it was Nate Sudfeld. I mean, I guess you had Brock Purdy on the roster, but you obviously didn't know that he was going to be the man. So, I mean, which quarterback room would you feel more confident in?
I'm trying to put myself back into those shoes of last offseason and trying to remember just how confident I was in Trey Lance. I remember being pretty confident. I was at least confident that he was going to be
You
a
still are.
decent, yeah, and
You're bullish.
a little less than last year, but I try my best. It's definitely waning, and it has at times a number of times this offseason. I was definitely confident in him last offseason, and we know how that whole thing went. But I think unequivocally, I am more confident or more bullish, as you said, in the quarterback room this year because you just have a little bit more proof from the guy that you're expected to be the starter. Brock Purdy was really good last year for what, 10 games, 11 games, 8 regular season games, and I guess really only 2 playoff games. He was really, really good. Um, so I think for that reason, it really has nothing to do with Trey Lance this offseason and Sam Darnold this offseason. I think specifically because of Brock Purdy, I'm more confident in the quarterback situation right now as I was 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with you, but I'm torn on whether I am more confident in this quarterback room because I'm more confident in this team or because I actually believe more in the quarterbacks. I was pretty high on Trey Lance last year, and I don't think he probably would have won every single game like Brock Purdy did, but I think with that roster, especially after the trade for Christian McCaffrey, I think he could have done a pretty damn good job. And
Yeah.
you even look at what Jimmy Garoppolo did, and I think the 3 games before he got hurt, he was we were talking about Jimmy Garoppolo putting up career numbers
Yeah.
and reestablishing himself as a guy that could potentially take this team to a Super Bowl or at least, get back to a Super Bowl. And then that was taken from underneath him. So I wonder because the quarterbacks, just because of those question marks, sort of get lumped in with the rest of the roster. And we're both obviously very high on the 49ers. But it's like, all right, am I actually feeling this good about Brock Purdy, or do I feel really good about Brock Purdy throwing to George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, having Trent Williams with a backup of Elijah Mitchell and that number 1 defense on the other side? Because I can make the same case for Sam Darnold, and I also can make the same case, I think, for Trey Lance heading into this year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the confidence in any individual quarterback is less about, say, individual accomplishments or a quarterback being an all pro or competing for an MVP. Uh, the confidence I have in whoever or the lack of confidence I have is just based around the question, can they help this team win games? And in reality, with the 49ers, their quarterback does not need to be relied on to do as much as other teams' quarterbacks. It's just simply not the way that it works with the 49ers roster. So I'm with you. The confidence, and it was really the same thing last year. I mean, the team incredibly talented last year as well, but you're right with the addition of Christian McCaffrey, at least offensively. skill position wise, the offensive line might be a little different question, but
Mhm.
skill position wise, you're 100% right that this roster is more conducive to success for a quarterback, and therefore it's easier to have confidence in that quarterback because they won't be asked uh, to carry as heavy of a load as perhaps in years past or for other teams.